Hi, my name is Simon Bendall from Mitchell Daysh. I have been the project manager for the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy since this work began in late 2014. With the support of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, this video will step you through some of the highlights of the strategy as an example of applying MFE's 2017 Coastal Hazards and Climate Change Guidance for local government. One of the most interesting elements of this work is the way it has transformed conversations with communities about planning for and responding to coastal hazards. The strategy has focused on the most populated stretch of the coastline in Hawke's Bay, between Tangoio in the north and Clifton in the south. You may be aware of some of the issues being faced along this coastline. Coastal erosion is perhaps the most prominent and is an ongoing concern for many parts of the coast, while in the longer term, coastal inundation is expected to be an even greater threat. If we do nothing, total losses have been estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the social impact and other effects associated with those losses. To respond to these challenges, the strategy has been developed as a joint project between the councils and iwi organisations of this stretch of coastline. Project governance is provided by a joint committee of the councils, with elected members from each project partner. The joint committee is supported by a technical advisory group formed by senior council staff. TAG, in turn, are assisted by a range of external consultant inputs and, in more recent times, by researchers from the Living at the Edge National Science Challenge project. Beginning in late 2014, the strategy has been developed in 4 distinct stages. These essentially are a simplified version of the 10-step decision cycle outlined in MFE's guidance. We have found that the 10-step cycle offers a useful breakdown of the steps required and sets these steps out in a logical order. The goal of the strategy is to develop a 100-year plan for this coastline, and in doing so, develop a process that can be rolled out to other coastal areas. The 100-year timeframe reflects direction provided by the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. How climate change will impact the coast is uncertain, and the further ahead you try to plan, the greater that uncertainty is. This means that our plans need to be flexible and adaptive to account for uncertainty, while still providing clear messages for people about the potential effects of coastal hazards and how we plan to respond to them in the short, medium and long term. While this strategy has been in progress for some time and there's a lot of detail that could be covered, I think it's worth focusing on 2 elements of the strategy that show practical application of MFE's guidance, in the hopes this is useful for other councils. The 2 key elements to discuss are community engagement and adaptive pathways. Beginning with community engagement, this has really been a fundamental cornerstone to our work in Hawke's Bay. The MFE guidance places great emphasis on the importance of this. Critically, there has been active community engagement through each stage of the strategy, including sharing the outcome of technical assessment work from stage 1 while it was still in draft form. But really, the community engagement element to this work all came together in January 2017, when stage 3 of our work commenced. This saw the formation of 2 community-based assessment panels. The panels were formed to cover the northern and southern extents of the strategy area and were deliberately formed to cross territorial authority boundaries so that all 3 councils had interests in both panels. Membership of the panels was broad, but was couched in the need to keep numbers manageable. Voting members included tangata whenua, coastal and regional communities and business interests, recreational interests and lifelines, and the Department of Conservation as the agency responsible for the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. The panels were supported by a kaitiaki o te rōpū who provided cultural guidance, a chair, facilitators and a panel secretary. The panels were tasked through a series of facilitated workshops to understand what the hazard assessment work is telling us and to develop recommended responses to those hazards. That process took over 12 months to complete and produced a series of recommendations for 9 priority coastal units in the strategy area. This was, at its core, a community-driven process. While technical expertise was available to advise and guide panel members, and the process was structured and facilitated, ultimately, this process was their process. The report, signed by all panel members, is their report. As we speak, the councils are now considering these recommendations and turning their minds towards stage 4 and implementation. This represents step 8 in the MFE 10-step decision cycle. The other key element of the MFE guidance to discuss is the use of adaptive pathways. This really provided a major tool that helped to unlock coastal hazards planning in Hawke's Bay. In applying this approach through the strategy, we simplified it for use by the community-based assessment panels and combined it with multi-criteria decision analysis. This helped us to develop and compare multiple possible pathways for each area of the coast. The result is a recommended 100-year adaptive pathway for each priority unit. Each pathway consists of a short, medium and long-term action or response. The example here is from Clifton. Nominally, the short term is defined as being the first 20 years, medium term 20 to 50 years, and long term is 50 to 100 years. Now I say nominally because the adaptive nature of the pathways allows each step to be implemented earlier or later in response to real-world conditions. So the medium and long-term steps could be brought forward or deferred, depending on how climate change progresses and on how effective each action is. If your short-term response is still effective after 20 years, I'll keep going with it. If it starts to be ineffective 15 years out, switch to the next action early. Importantly, the pathways have also been designed to be flexible enough to switch to an entirely new option if conditions require it. The goal here is to define a preferred pathway based on what we know now, but leave room to move so that future uncertainty can be accommodated. The decision points to switch between the actions in a pathway are determined by signals and triggers, and the guidance provides useful discussion here. This remains a future package of work for us, but importantly, in our process, pathways can be defined without signals and triggers at this time. While I won't cover the details of this last example shows how we brought it all together as a summary for each priority unit and to assist panel members to confirm their preferred pathways. 6 pathways were developed for each unit, covering the spectrum from the soft retreat type responses to hard engineering. Considering the multi-criteria analysis score for each pathway and separately measures for economics, the panels were able to finalise their recommendations. In this case, you can see that pathway 5 is a clear preference for Clifton and has been recommended by the panel. As a final word, the work of the strategy is still ongoing, but we have learned a lot of interesting lessons on this journey so far. To summarise a few key pointers that may be of interest to other councils. Firstly, it's important to take your time and to plan carefully. Climate change and coastal hazards are complex subject areas, and whatever is decided in terms of a response will have far-reaching implications. Taking the time to bring people along with you on the journey is critical. That includes not just directly affected communities, but also those that may need to contribute to the costs at some point. It's also critical to stay close to politicians and to senior staff as this work progresses. Secondly, the pathways approach is, in our view, essential. It's a sound, technical approach to respond to uncertainty, but it also allows the conversation to move beyond strongly held opinions about what should or should not be done right now, towards long-term thinking about what might need to be done 20, 50 and 100 years down the track. Thirdly, bringing the community into the tent has been crucial, while ensuring that the decision-making role for the councils is preserved, clearly defined and understood by all parties. And lastly, implementation will always be a challenge. We're moving into that phase now. So, that's a brief summary of our work in Hawke's Bay, and 2 examples of how we have applied MFE's guidance. Hopefully, this has been useful to other councils. We are more than happy to share our work and encourage you to visit the project website or get in touch with a member of the team.